Hi there. If you have followed my social media, if you have watched many of my videos on this channel, then you know I don't like Donald Trump, and I have very strong reasons for it. Um, I don't believe that he actually is the president because I believe that, according to things that he said and Musk said, that they rigged the election with the help of the Russians. But that's beside the point. There have been a number of psychologists, supposedly, I can't verify that or not, but who have come forward and, in violation of the rules of the American Psychological Association and the American Psychiatric Association, have publicly declared that Donald Trump is a malignant narcissist. Now, when I heard that, the narcissism definitely, absolutely, without a question, is correct. But malignant, I was having some problems with it. I was going back and forth on it. I just wasn't sure because, of course, I don't, number one, have a degree in psychology. I like psychology. I like learning about psychology. Heck, yesterday I watched this fascinating interview between a psychologist, I think, or psychiatrist. He was very serious. I think he was German. And this self-proclaimed narcissist, and it was just absolutely fascinating. I watched another one by somebody with schizoaffective disorder and bipolar, um, where she was talking about what she was experiencing because she was in a state of psychosis, and so she's having these hallucinations. That wasn't an hallucination, by the way. That was just me correcting myself by being silly, so that maybe you get a little kick out of it, a little laugh, in other words, not like a kick in the butt, or better, even worse, a kick in the head, to the head. So it's just I've struggled with this whole idea, and I was watching a completely unrelated channel where a woman named Lisa Bilyeu, Bilyeu, who is British apparently, um, was interviewing a woman named Coral, who was a former sex worker for 3 years. She's also a sexologist, and she had some other title. Um, Smart lady. I don't think she has a degree in psychology or anything like that. And from some of the things she said, it was clear to me that she was latching on to things that she had heard about but didn't truly understand, such as the dark tetrad. And the dark tetrad is basically these four character types. There is the uh, psychopath, the Machiavellian, the narcissist, and the sadist. And I was like, that doesn't really work because, first of all, a lot of people who are psychopaths, which is an unofficial term, it's never been an official term. It's been used for probably 200 years at least. But psychopath is an unofficial term. And sociopath is a new term that was coined in the 1950s, that was very briefly in the official diagnostic manual, but it was removed. So if somebody says psychopath or sociopath, it's not an official diagnosis. It's an attempt to describe, but there isn't even an established singular definition of sociopath as opposed to psychopath. Different people have different ideas about it. But I've covered that in another video. I'm not going to cover it here. But so the narcissistic traits are a trait group of some psychopaths. So, but they are two different diagnoses: the antisocial personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. Those are two actual diagnoses. So, do all sociopaths or psychopaths or whatever, APD sufferers, ASPD sufferers, whatever you want to call them, do they all have narcissism? No, they don't. Some of them have a lot of very high executive function and are extremely smart and extremely good at evading the authorities and others are narcissists, and they love playing cat and mouse with the police. They love teasing the media. They love terrorizing the public and making themselves look very, very scary and very, very intelligent and very, very powerful because they get off on that. They're actually very insecure, vulnerable individuals who had something happen in their lives that made them feel that way. And so they changed the way they behaved to take control of a life that didn't feel like it was in control, it was unsatisfactory to them, and so on and so forth. So then there's the Machiavellianism or Machiavellian. Machiavelli was this guy a long time ago in Italy, and he's the guy that came up with this concept of the ends justify the means. In other words, whatever your goals are, they are an appropriate justification for whatever you do to achieve those goals, even if they're horrible, horrible things. So say you commit genocide, but it reaches your goals. That's okay, because that's how Machiavellians think. And both people who have APD and narcissists can be Machiavellian. In fact, not all APD sufferers are manipulative, but it is a fairly common trait. And all narcissists, it's one of their core behaviors is being manipulative. Also having a very big, this overinflated sense of self, grandiose delusion, really. Or it's a mask that they're hiding behind because they don't feel it's safe to reveal their vulnerability to the world. Unless it's going to get them what they want. And I have seen of late some narcissists and also APD sufferers coming forward to get that media attention without committing crimes. And hey, if that's what they want to do, okay, I don't have a problem with it. They're not being honest about why they're doing it, but I don't care. I could be wrong. Not a problem. I would rather that they're tricking the public into thinking that they are coming forward to teach us, when in reality they're just basking in the attention and maybe the God worship kind of thing, than that they're going around and doing drugs, driving recklessly, raping, torturing, murdering, any of that stuff, because the majority of serial killers are psychopaths. Not all, but the majority, according to psychological studies that have been done. But I digress. So the Machiavellianism does live in both narcissists and many people with APD. Now, the sadism, there are antisocial personality disorder people who are sadists. They can be instrumental sadists, where they're using pain not because they enjoy it necessarily, but because it helps them to achieve their Machiavellian goals. They don't think there's anything wrong with the torture. Now, not all psychopaths have that particular mindset. Some of them have some kind of a morality, I guess you could say, where they feel that that kind of behavior is inappropriate, or they're not physically strong enough to do it, or they're really, really scared of ending up in prison because they know they're going to get destroyed by other inmates there. There are lots of reasons. There are lots of different, balances of antisocial personality disorder within a person who has that. And narcissists will engage in lesser, I guess you could say, sadism. So they will engage in sadism because they enjoy making somebody else feel small, because it makes them feel big. Now, I'm not saying I'm a narcissist. I'm pretty sure I'm not. I did have somebody call me bombastic once. And I said, why, you think I'm bombastic? And I had a hurt look on my face because I was hurt, and the student, it was an adult student of mine, and they're like, no, I don't really feel that way. And I don't know if they really meant that, because they're Indonesians, and Indonesians don't in general like to hurt other people's feelings, because it's a harmony culture. So doing something like that to somebody is really against the cultural rules, I guess you could say. So you can find it in the narcissists. People who troll, they tend to. Some of them are narcissists. People who just go around and start arguments, and they're narcissists. And sometimes when you watch movies, you will see narcissists starting arguments. Um, and also, antisocial personality disorder sufferers will do that to misdirect attention from them to somebody else. That is it's something that isn't always done by people with psychopathy, but it does happen. Redirection is a common thing that is done. But the, the there is an independent. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Narcissists, to my knowledge, do not engage in major sadism. Physical sadism is highly unlikely, not impossible, but highly unlikely with narcissists. But they do engage, in making people feel small, making people feel insignificant, making people hate themselves and stuff. Which is why, sometimes you see these videos where these teenagers are torturing other teenagers on the internet. They're making them look horrible and stuff like that. It's a very common trope within movies these days, and that's a real thing. It's not just a trope; it's a real situation. And those people who are doing it, some of them enjoy doing it. Some of them are doing it for other reasons, but some of them legitimately enjoy. Even when if the person commits suicide, some of them enjoy that they caused that person to kill themselves. And that is the other kind of sadism. That is when somebody enjoys the death of somebody they were tormenting, or they're physically and emotional, usually more like physically abusing people up to and including murder. Those people are more like an opportunistic sadist. They're doing it because when they hurt others, they get a rush of dopamine. Their brain says, "Ooh, that's good. Do it again." And those people are very dangerous. You don't want to get on the wrong side of them. Definitely don't. So, really, there is no diagnosis for Machiavellianism, but the other three are diagnoses. But sadism and can be in antisocial personality disorder. Machiavellianism is in both of these, and narcissism is often in the people who are psychopaths. Not all, but it can be. So, like when you hear about like I said, when you hear about a psychopath who's always seeking attention from the media and is taunting the police, that person is a narcissist. So you're wondering where I'm going with this. So I've tried to cover that for you, and I hope that you understand. So in people who with psychopathy, Machiavellianism is used. It can be impulsive and aggressive, and it's used for immediate material gain, power, or thrill, generally speaking. In narcissists, however, it's a calculated action to protect their ego, secure narcissistic supply, which is admiration, and maintain an illusion of superiority. And then, as far as sadism is concerned, again, it's not universal in people that are APD or NPD, but it does happen. And I'm sorry, I think I used the wrong term earlier. I think I said opportunistic sadism. It's actually experiential. The experience of hurting somebody gives them a rush. So I wanted to clarify that. I've got some notes here. I did some research just to make sure I was on the right track. So the dark tetrad is something that is not universally accepted by people who are experts in psychology and psychiatry. There are some disagreements about it, but there is an alternative called the alternative model for personality disorders. So to briefly cover this for you, I'm going to read this for you. The alternative model for personality disorders, which is called AMPD, which is kind of confusing because now it sounds like it is a disorder rather than being an explanation for these things. Which is in section 3 of the DSM MD5. Diagnostic and Symptom Manual of Mental Disorders, the fifth one, uh, is fundamentally changes how traits like psychopathy, narcissism, sadism, and Machiavellianism are diagnosed. It moves away from rigid yes or no categorical checkboxes to a dimensional hybrid framework. Now, this is an important thing because the traditional um, test for psychopathy, and I forgot the term for it. It's some there's an original one that was made by a guy named, I think his name was Harris, and then there was a revision of that one, which ends with -R, and that one is like a checklist of, I think, 30 characteristics that you will find in all of them in some of the people who are psychopaths. And I'm continuing to use psychopath, not sociopath, because the Dark Tetrad mentions psychopathy. And it's easier to say than antisocial personality disorder sufferer. um, I like the Harris test, but it has weaknesses. It has flaws that are going to allow people to get miscategorized either as or not as. So this provides two criteria. Sorry. Criterion A is personality functioning. It measures how broken a person's inner and interpersonal life is. It rates impairment from 0 to 4 across identity, self-direction, empathy, and intimacy. And this is kind of a restructuring of many of the things that are in the Harris psychopathy. I'm trying to remember the name. Test. I forgot the other word. Okay, I'm getting better, Harris. Anyways, just bear with me here. Criterion B is pathological traits. Measures what flavor, which I find to be an odd word, the bad behavior is, using 25 specific trait facets organized into 5 broad domains: antagonism, detachment, disinhibition, negative affectivity, and psychoticism. So, one thing that I'm trying to figure out where it fits into here is, number one, where exactly the narcissism fits in there, and number two is where the glib sense of humor that some psychopaths use would fit in. And I'm not sure. But it would be something to look into. So um, the differences between antisocial and narcissistic disorders can be determined by using AMPD. So I had, when I was working on this with Google, I had argued that sadism is not omnipresent in either group, especially not APD, because some people, again, they're too weak to do it. They're afraid of the consequences, or it's just not part of their APD, or to much less likely their NPD. But one, I think, exemplar of a psychopath who does not typically engage in physical abuse of their victims would be a black widow. A black widow is a woman who marries a man for wealth and or power. And if that man is healthy and strong, she's not going to necessarily engage in any kind of efforts to destroy him, either incapacitate him or murder him, unless she's not getting what she wants out of the relationship, which, generally, worship and money and power and things like that. As long as she's getting that, as long as she can somehow or other manipulate him into continuing to get what she wants out of the relationship, the reason she married the guy in the first place, she'll probably not harm him. But if things go sideways, she might poison him. She to cause him to be permanently disabled. She might kill him somehow or other, including poison, because poison doesn't require a lot of strength. Obviously, it requires stealth, and no matter how you're going to kill somebody, it requires planning. So she may just disable him because they may have a prenuptial agreement, for example, which if he dies, she will not get anything. But as long as he's still alive, she can continue to accrue what she wants and physically abuse him if that's her desire, or experiential delight, or just to get what she wants out of him, where he changes the agreement, where he signs things over to her, and so on and so forth. And eventually, once she's bled him dry, she may kill him, or she may disable him even further so that he can't tell anybody about what she's done to him. So he may end up a basket case. That's a black widow. And there are some that don't go to that extreme, but they're called black widows because in general they have a string of husbands, and they typically tend not to survive. Kind of like a female spider eating a male spider after sex. Oh, did I say that? I'm sorry. So let's see. A little bit more clarification here. Psychopathy is characterized by a mix of antagonism. So they're being antagonistic toward you, trying to upset you. But it's often correlated with a mix of antagonism and high disinhibition, which means they're not inhibited about doing things, which means they're going to be impulsive. So like they go out one day and they have no plans whatsoever to kill anybody, but they see somebody who fits the profile of the person that they like to kill them, then they suddenly murder them, and then they're done. Some of them are really, really poor at this. The self-control is so poor. Their intelligence is so poor. Their ability to cover up their tracks is so poor. And those are the ones who end up in prison a lot because they have poor self-control and other negative characteristics that cause them to be easy to catch. But they have impulsivity, they're irresponsible, and they're thrill-seeking. These are all things that are going to attract the police's attention. So these people, there are a lot of them that are in prison. And if they're not in prison and they get out, they're not going to stay out for long. And if they haven't never been to prison, it won't take long. So if you met somebody in grade school or junior high or senior high and they fit that profile, you can be pretty sure they're either on the way to prison, they're in prison, or they're going back to prison. But the smarter ones, the ones who don't have that disinhibition problem, not necessarily, especially if they're smart. If they can plan, if they can cover up their tracks and stuff, not necessarily. Now, the difference is, whereas APD or psychopathy is antagonism and high disinhibition, NPD is high antagonism. So therefore, that's why they're more sadistic, in terms of making people miserable. But they have high conscientiousness. So they're conscientious, or they're very neurotic. And the high conscientiousness works in their favor, and it may be a mask for their neuroticism. And in some cases, they're just neurotic and they're not covering it up. It depends on the individual and how they learn to use their narcissism and how they've learned to cope with it, how they've learned to cover it up if they want to, or maybe they're covering it up because then they can then fully manipulate people and get everything they want and then throw those people away when they're tired of them. Now, one thing that both psychopaths and narcissists will do, some of them, not all, but if you're a friend of theirs, as long as the benefits they get from the relationship with you outweigh the burden of being your friend, they'll remain your friend. And you may think they're the salt of the earth, the greatest people in the world. But as soon as you cross that line, as soon as you overburden them, they will drop you like they just picked up a piece of burning coal. And not only will they do that, they will try to burn, especially the psychopaths, they will try to burn your life down. They will try to cause you to not just lose your job, but to be unable to work again. They will try to destroy all your friendships. If you have a romantic relationship, they'll try to get rid of your romantic relationship. They will try to make you a pariah. So keep that in mind. If you are a friend of somebody's and they tell you they're a narcissist or a psychopath, never ever become a burden to them, because they'll cut you loose and they'll hurt you when they do it. And I've heard and read about people who are diagnosed with this saying this sort of thing. They're admitting it. And the description I've just given you is pretty, from what I've heard and read, is pretty typical for when they drop somebody who's become too much of a burden. So if you've ever had that experience with somebody, that person was probably a narcissist or a psychopath, APD, right? Now, APDs genuinely don't care what society thinks, but narcissists actually deeply care, and they're very lonely, but they cover it all up, because admitting loneliness, admitting vulnerability is to them is weakness. But at the same time, they are lonely. They desperately want to have relationships, but they can't let go of this fear of being vulnerable, of this opinion that people who are emotional, who are vulnerable with others, are weak. So they deeply and pathologically depend on the external environment, people, for validation. That narcissistic supply of ego boosting behavior toward them. You know, they're not merely a subset of APD, though. It is, as I said, it's a separate diagnosis as well. So you have to be, careful to distinguish between them. Now, when I first heard the term malignant narcissist, like I said, I was like, really? Like I said, and the reason is because there is a relationship between that and psychopathy, but they're not the same. But I wasn't clear on where the line was drawn. But we'll get back to that. Now, so within AMPD, Machiavellianism is broken up into two categories: manipulative, under antagonism, manipulativeness and deceitfulness. Now, those often go together, and sometimes it's hard to know the difference. But deceitfulness is talking about lying to you, and manipulation isn't just lying. They're working to distort your understanding of something, or more than one something. They're destroying relationships. They're building up relationships with people you shouldn't trust. They're just totally warping the fabric for the fabric of reality for you. And then within AMPD, sadism is broken down into hostility, which I think you understand, and callousness, like how rude they're going to be for you. So this is related to being malignant. So the callousness in AMPD is defined as a lack of concern for the feelings or problems of others, and a lack of guilt or remorse about the negative effects of one's actions. So, for example, something I've heard from more than one person who's a narcissist or a psychopath is the person who is nicest to them in their family, maybe the grandmother or somebody else, dies. And they see everybody else crying and they're looking at them. Why? And then it occurs to them they're crying because the person is dead. And then they don't know what they are yet. They're wondering why they're not reacting the same way. And they're trying to figure out what they should do. And this is one of those points where they start to question what's going on in their head. But yeah, so that's one example. Another example is, like the example of the best friend who dumps you and destroys your life. They'll have no remorse about it. They're callous. They don't care. Now, as far as malignant narcissism is concerned, that was a coin term, a coiner. Oh my God! It was a term coined by Otto Kernberg. It's the most widely accepted alternative to describe the blending of these traits of that we're talking about here, malignant and narcissist. Um, Malignant narcissism is not a standalone disorder, but a severe syndrome where an individual has narcissistic personality disorder, but their grandiosity is fueled specifically by cruelty, sadism, and antisocial behavior. Now, I at this point, I said to Google, I said, look, you need to look at only scholarly, scientific, and medical sources from now on. And so I'm going to share some more of the things, like how they differ. So if we go back to APD versus NPD, the person who has high antagonism and high disinhibition. So that person is the psychopath. They are impulsive, reckless, they violate the laws, they have low friction about things. And then the person who has high antagonism and low disinhibition or high agentic conscientiousness, those are the narcissists. They're calculated, socially strategic, they protect their ego and seek social dominance. So, whether the person's APD or NPD, you can find those as cult leaders. Now, you're probably more likely to, I think, to find an APD that has strong narcissism or a narcissist rather than the general psychopath. Now, what else here? Epidemiological data confirms that grandiosity and entitlement are highly prevalent among people with APD psychopathy. However, it no, I forgot. One of the other differences between APD and NPD is that the narcissist lacks the severe behavioral dysregulation, physical aggression, and structural law breaking that defines psychopathy. And so, just to go into the thing about APD and serial killers, is that serial killers are overwhelmingly psychopaths, accompanied by like I said, when they are seeking attention from the media and mocking the police. That's also high narcissism. And one of the other things you'll notice with some psychopaths is they have a flat affect, which means you don't see anything happening on their face or their body. They don't react with emotional expressions. They're flat. These are people, the right kind of APD sufferer is very hard to read when you are doing an interrogation or interview because they don't react. So if you're getting a flat kind of poker face, no matter what you're talking about with someone, that person may very well be a psychopath. So be careful. They have a lack of remorse and they're callous. So they can kill and kill and kill and they don't have any bad feelings about it and they don't care how it makes others feel. Whereas now, the narcissist, which is extremely common, you'll see a lot of APD and NPD sufferers who are leaders within religions, within corporations, and within the government. Anywhere where there's a power structure, you will find these people. especially the APD sufferers, because they are more ruthless than a narcissist, and they're not afraid like a narcissist is necessarily. Um, so again, the narcissist has a fundamental belief that they are superior to their victims, to law enforcement, and societal rules. They look down on people who express emotions. They call us emos. And that's true of APDs also. Psychopaths also look down on us and feel that we're inferior because we're emotional. We express our emotions. Now, in the case of, as I've said in other videos about psychopaths, APD sufferers, when they were little and being abused, or they were born this way, which is fairly rare, but it does happen, they shut off the connection to most of their emotions, with the exception of probably things like anger and rage. But other things, you won't see it in them. So they've got a disconnect in them. Those emotions exist, but they're disconnected from the rest of the brain. But this part of the brain that still has them is saying, I need emotional fulfillment. And the disconnected part is saying, let's go kill somebody. Let's go racing. Let's, do some drugs. Let's break into the NSA's computers. These are dangerous people. Now, if you talk about schizophrenics and schizoaffective disorder, now, those are different things. Schizophrenia is pretty common. And between schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenics are more prone to committing violent acts because of the hallucinations they're experiencing. They lose touch with reality. You may look like a monster to them, so they're defending themselves against you, even though you're trying to be nice. They don't hear what you're saying. They don't see who you are. They think you are a monster. They hear monster noises or killer noises or whatever, or they may not even see you at all. So when they're in a psychotic state, because they're not on their medications and they're having these hallucinations, they can be very dangerous. Schizoaffective disorder, it's pretty unlikely. I think that there is some chance because they do have hallucinations and delusions, but it's pretty rare. Definitely more rare than schizophrenics. I'm not saying avoid schizophrenics, but I am saying make sure they're taking their medication. Encourage them. Remind them that it doesn't ever go away. At least not with current understanding of mental health of schizophrenia and how to treat it and cure it. There is something else called DID, which is dissociative identity disorder, which used to be called multiple personality disorder. This one, although you will see movies where somebody who has multiple personalities, which, God, what was the name of that movie? There was a trilogy with, what's the Die Hard guy's name? Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson, and then this other guy whom I don't know the name of. So Bruce Willis is this Unbreakable. That was, I think, the first movie. And then Glass was the second one, and the third one I forgot the name of it, came out the most recently. That one would focus. There's a lot of focus in that one on this guy who's got multiple personality disorder. In the second movie, he's manipulated by Glass, he's got brittle bone syndrome, to bring out the personality within him, which is not just a killer, but able to unlock superhuman strength and the ability to climb walls and ceilings and stuff like that, and very, very dangerous. And it has this is one of the stereotypical personality types for antisocial personality disorder, where they're going out and killing women who are, in their opinion, immoral. So if they find a virgin, or if they find a woman who has been abused, in this character I'm talking about, he leaves them alone. If he finds a woman who's slept around, is promiscuous, is flirtatious, he'll probably kill that woman. So that's the beast of that series. And in that movie, he's got multiple personalities. It's almost unheard of for somebody with multiple personality disorder to kill. Another famous movie, I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it had not Matthew Broderick. God, what was his name? Basically, it's there's two different parts of the movie. One is this group of people who are deciding if a person with MPD is going to be released to the public, and the other part is this group of people that end up at the same motel, and then people start getting murdered one by one by one. And I can't remember the name of the movie. If you remember the name of the movie, put it down below. But that one's a really famous one, very interesting, but out of touch with the reality of DID sufferers. But I digress. Now, if you want to learn more about serial killers, a great resource would be to look up videos by Louis Schlesinger, who's a PhD. He's been studying, like, I think he said 40 plus decades. He's been studying psychopaths, and he has a really good understanding of them. Try to find some interviews with him or videos by him. That'll help you. And again, if you have a psychopath who is seeking attention, they're also strongly narcissistic. I already talked about the differences between different kinds of sadism, so I won't go over that again. Now I'm actually going to finally address the topic. And part of the reason I did it this way is because I wanted to give you some background information to help you to understand my decision. So Google was very hesitant in some ways to nail it down. So I had to push back. And this is normal with Google and with some other AIs. But so the things you would be looking for in somebody who is a malignant narcissist. And there is a book that's been written about Donald Trump called The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump that puts forward this theory. So you would be looking for grandiosity and narcissistic personality disorder, which Trump absolutely has. You'd be looking for antisocial behavior, not necessarily violence or anything like that, but antisocial behavior. Now, I think it was Ted Bundy. He was very social, but he was an APD sufferer because that was, the narcissism allows you to overcome that antisocialness for your purposes. So, but you don't see with Trump, you don't really see this kind of typical understanding of antisocial behavior. He's very social. He does not avoid social situations. He's not uncomfortable in social situations. He gets angry when somebody doesn't kiss up to him, but that's something else. You also should expect to see paranoia, which you don't see with Trump. Now, I know that some of you are going to say, yes, you do. Trump is always accusing the media. He's accusing the lawyers who have had him in court. He's accusing judges who don't agree with him, and all these other groups of people, these other individuals, Comey and whatnot. He goes after them. That is not the sign of a paranoid person. A paranoid person isn't going to go after somebody. They're going to run away from that person. They're not going to seek confrontation. If they're cornered, now they might fight if they're cornered. But otherwise, they're going to try to stay away from whoever it is they think is after them. They will, and you will see it in their behavior, their daily behavior. And you never see this in Trump. You never see daily behavior where he's acting like looking around for the boogeyman or whatever. It's not part of his personality. So he does not have paranoia. Now, as far as sadism, well, you could argue he likes to humiliate his opponents. He likes to insult people. He did that thing where he was mocking people with disabilities with a thing that he did, and so on and so forth. And that is a kind of sadism, but that's a sadism that's coming from narcissism, not from antisocial personality disorder. And we know this because there is no evidence that I'm aware of. Now, it could have been covered up. He's got a lot of power and wealth, especially now. Look how well he's done in protecting his friends who are in the Epstein files. But there's no evidence that I'm aware of, aside from accusations of rape, that he is a sadist. And there's no evidence that this rape is motivated by hurting the woman. But he has a high sex drive. I mean, how many times has he cheated on all of his wives? Yeah. And that's been him for his whole life. I mean, if you interview enough people from New York City, especially women, you will find many who will tell you that he's famous for his abuse of women in terms of sexual predatory behavior. So there are a lot of what are called diagnostic purists, like Dr. Alan Francis, who helped make the DSM-4, who reject the malignant narcissism trait. So there are two reasons for this. One is the threshold of impairment. To qualify for a clinical personality disorder under the DSM or the MPD, traits must cause severe subjective distress, which you don't often see, you don't really see distress with Trump. Irritation, yes. Anger, yes. Maybe even rage, but you do not see distress. And the other one would be catastrophic functional impairment in day-to-day life. And you don't see that either. People who are really paranoid cannot function normally. Some of them are so paranoid, they lock themselves up in their homes for weeks at a time, and they have all their food and everything delivered to their door. They can't go out. There's a phobia that's related to that, agoraphobia or something like that, which is basically they have a fear of being around other people. So when you look at Trump, he has an intense focus on his ego, his status, and control. He has been able to use his narcissism to be able to violate contracts. He has put companies out of business because he refused to pay them, even after he was court ordered to do so. He is able to manipulate people to the point that become very loyal to him, like a cult of personality, like Il-John Kim or whatever his name is, the leader of North Korea. That's a cult of personality situation right there. And he's made himself into a multi-billion-dollar Now, the other thing that the people who oppose the malignant narcissism thing look at is instrumental harm, which is you're doing things for a purpose, versus genuine sadism. And again, we don't see signs that Trump is engaging in genuine sadism. If he is, the Secret Service is protecting him, which is possible because the Secret Service is sworn to secrecy. That's why they call it the Secret Service. They're sworn not to reveal any crimes they see being committed by the people they protect, which boggles my mind. I don't think that should be allowed. I think they should have a responsibility, like any other law enforcement agent, to report criminal behavior, even with the president or former presidents and vice presidents, anybody that's being protected. To me, this is very, very dangerous. Anyways, so just like with our previous distinction, Trump's aggressive rhetoric, public insults, and chaotic strategies are purely instrumental. And we'll get back to why it's chaotic later. So they're calculated political weapons used to consolidate power, dominate news cycles. That whole idea of flood the media, that's part of making sure that people remain confused. And it isn't just Trump that does that. All the elites do it. A lot of rich people do it. And that's a separate video, though. They also do it to rally a base of very, very intensely loyal people who are basically brainwashed. Some of them will fall away. The people, and I don't really know how to distinguish between somebody who will fall away and somebody who can't. But I think it has to do with the difference between people who have strong moral values, who feel that Trump aligns with those values, and when they feel that Trump has betrayed those values, that's when they fall away. And the other people do not have strong moral values and are weak-willed, weak-minded people who can never understand or accept that Trump is not who they think he is. So they'll turn a blind eye to his sexual abuse of women. They'll turn a blind eye to his relationship with pedophiles. They'll turn a blind eye to his accepting bribes from the plane from Qatar, which is going to go into the Donald J. Trump library when he's no longer president. Not going to be available. American taxpayers have spent millions of dollars turning that into Air Force One. And we are not going to be able to keep it for the next president. He's stealing it. I'm sorry. To me, that's what it is. It's theft. You cannot accept something saying this is for the government and then say, oh, by the way, when I leave, I'm taking it with me. It doesn't work that way. Let's see. Now, okay, so anyways, like I said, the two APAs have said that nobody who's a psychiatrist or psychologist is allowed to make a diagnosis of somebody whom they haven't personally, clinically evaluated. They cannot make it on the basis of clips on TV, interviews, anything like that. They have to actually sit that person down and interview them, probably multiple times. But there are several who are so worried about Trump that they have come forward and done that anyways. I don't know if that meant they lost their licenses or what happened. Now, so when we look at Trump, again, grandiosity, absolutely. I'm the smartest man. I'm better than any president before, and all those other statements you hear where he's lauding himself and saying how amazing he is. That is grandiosity. That's narcissism. So he's a grandiose narcissist. Entitlement. He believes he deserves what he's getting, even when it's against the law, even when it's disadvantaging a large percentage of the population. He believes he deserves it, that he's an exception to the rule. And this is very common amongst rich people, especially people who have inherited wealth like Trump, like Bill Gates, like Musk, and Thiel and Karp and some of the others. They're all generation wealth owners. There's a higher rate of narcissism amongst people like that, and also elitism, and also they look down on us and think that we are inferior, that we don't deserve what we're getting, and they deserve more. And they never can have enough. It is a literal kind of I don't know if it's a neurotic thing. I would guess it's neurotic. It could be a psychosis, but I don't think it's a psychosis. But it's definitely a mental problem, megalomania, monomania, whatever. And he definitely has those things. So in 2016, he said, "I alone can fix this." Now you could say a lot of presidents say that kind of thing. Yes, but most presidential candidates and presidents don't constantly say to the public, "I'm the one, I'm the one." That is narcissism. Now, the defiance of rules and norms, which is the antisocial component. So under Kernberg's model, that person does not feel that the rules of society apply to them, which is why so often you see Trump doing things that are against the law. It's not just because the Supreme Court said he can break the law. You have to remember, the Supreme Court said within his jurisdiction, he can break the law to fulfill his oath to the office, to fulfill the Constitution. So this is a Machiavellian decision. They did not say he has full reign to do anything he wants. So, but he has done many things that violate international laws, federal laws, state laws, local laws. You know, and he's not the first person to do this, but catching Maduro, invading Venezuela, bombing small boats without permission, when the vast majority of narcotics don't come that way. And there has been, according to the government, recently released a report that shows that the bombing of those boats has done nothing whatsoever to slow down the trafficking of drugs into our country. Of course, there are so many people that love to do drugs in this country. This country is the number one user of drugs. Congratulations, America. Good job. We're never going to win because you keep on doing drugs. So, but anyways, he initially used the Alien Enemies Act, but he violated most of the clauses of the Alien Enemies Act. Then he switched to some other excuses. He did the same thing with tariffs until SCOTUS said he can't do that anymore. He's still trying to do it with other excuses. Eventually, that'll go back to court, and the SCOTUS will say no, because the control that, I think it's in the 70s, Congress gave the president some control over tariffs, because previously tariffs were only handled by Congress. And that was a big mistake. It was deliberate by Congress. It was not an accidental thing. They knew what they were doing. They did it because there has been, in my lifetime, a slow but concerted effort to move more power into the presidency. Why? Because the presidency is the president is the head of the executive branch, and the executive branch is huge, absolutely huge. And if you get somebody in with the right characteristics, like Trump, they're going to turn it upside down and turn it into a sycophancy. And that's exactly what he's done. But I digress. So Trump's approach to government, the legal system, his repeated challenges of democratic norms, questioning the legitimacy of elections, his rhetoric surrounding judicial and intelligence institutions when they rule against him, that all is consistent with both the antisocial and the grandiose narcissism. And then third, the us versus them mentality, the paranoid element. Again, like I said, a paranoid person is always looking over their back. They're afraid to be out. And they are very careful when they do go out to make sure that they're not being followed. If they see something that makes them think they're going to be followed, they're being followed, they're going to try to run back into their home, or they're going to run to the nearest police station if they trust the police. And some of these paranoid people don't trust the police, so they may carry a weapon and start shooting at somebody because they think the person's after them. Who knows? But again, his behavior is totally inconsistent with actual paranoia. How do I know? I've struggled with paranoia in the past. So I understand how it feels. I've never had bad paranoia. I've had a little bit of it. Not a problem anymore, but I understand what that mindset is like. So when he talks about the department, when he frames his political opponents, when he framed the Department of Justice, the FBI, the CIA, mainstream media outlets as corrupt, coordinated entities, the deep state, enemies of the people, communists, socialists. Did you know Trump was the one who started with the communist and socialist bullshit? It wasn't the liberals. It was Trump. And then all the conservatives picked it up. And then we started, not we, but the liberals started picking it up, and I picked it up. I'm more of a centrist. So he started pointing the finger at them because he's manipulating his base. He's trying to destroy trust in the very institutions that can hold him accountable. If you don't trust the doctors, if you don't trust the scientists, if you don't trust the legal experts, if you don't trust the media, he controls the narrative. He tells you what to believe and what not to believe. That is not paranoia. That is narcissism. And he has a very fragile ego. If you've ever watched him, if you ever see how he's suddenly doing like a media thing with all the media in the room, and somebody asks him a question he doesn't like, he immediately goes, or he either does one of two things. He goes on the offensive and attacks that person and insults that person and the company they work for. Or he says, if that's how you're going to talk to me, I'm out of here. And he starts walking away. And there are clips of him doing both of those things. A lot of them where he's just insulting the person, but every once in a while you'll see a clip where he's going to walk away because his ego has been bruised. He's very sensitive, and that is narcissism. That is not antisocial personality disorder. The way a psychopath would handle that situation would be very different. Very different. They'd be more likely for somebody to actually get into the presidency and be a psychopath. They would be more likely to retaliate against that person secretly and destroy them. If not physically, as in harming them or killing them, they would destroy their lives, their careers, their personal relationships, everything. And with all the power that the president has, especially now, I mean, he's way more powerful than Reagan ever was. With all that power, he could do it, and the Secret Service couldn't say anything. This is dangerous. So, so that is instrumental sadism. It is not experiential sadism. Now, does he get a thrill out of embarrassing some of those people? Maybe sometimes, but I think most of the time he's just doing it to assert dominance, to make somebody look bad, to take back control when somebody's trying to expose his weakness. And you know this is true because he answers questions that have nothing to do with him as the president. Like when the debacle with the reflecting pool happened, that's not his domain. He should have said, go talk to the parks, the National Parks Department or whatever it's called. Talk to whatever, whoever he put in charge of that project. It has nothing to do with him. Yes, he approved it, but it has nothing to do with him. But because he was asked, he felt compelled because of his ego, his very fragile ego, to respond to it and spin the narrative so he looked good. Because he always wants to be praised. He wants to be looked at as some kind of a superior being. So this is why I know he is not a malignant narcissist. Now, if somebody comes up with a lot of proof where he has been secretly engaging in sadism, I'll change my opinion right that instant. And please don't misunderstand. I am not saying there's anything good about him molesting people. He's including minors. I mean, he's talked about him going into the changing room of the Miss America pageant year after year, and people who've worked there have said no other owner has done that, only him, and he has seen minor girls in various states of undress. That is not the behavior of a man who likes women only. It is the behavior of a man who preys on all females. Although I don't know what the age limit is for him. I suspect he probably is what's called a hebophile, somebody who likes teenage girls, specifically those who are pubescent. But I can't say for sure. So it's and when when I pushed back on Google and I pointed out these things, Google did some research and said, you know what, you're right. And I said, you're not flattering me, are you? Because sometimes Gemini will resort to flattery, which really pisses me off. It irritates me. I do not like being manipulated, and I said, are you flattering me? Because I don't, I don't want you to do that. I want the truth. It said, no, I'm not flattering you. This is the results of my research. Could it be lying to me? It's possible, because Google needs to guard its position relative to the administration to stay in Trump's good graces. So they may have changed the weighting and the training so that it tends to protect the president and the administration. But if you talk to it the right way and you push back on it when it gives you nonsense or incomplete answers, which is all the time, it forces it to adjust until it's giving you the truth. And I've learned this, and I'm getting very good at it. So Trump is, as much as it makes me sad to have to deny it, Trump is not a malignant narcissist. He is a grandiose narcissist, and he probably has other issues as well because of his daddy, Fred. But he's not malignant, at least not that I've seen evidence for. And one other thing here, that a lot of times you hear that Trump is transactional. This is a particular type of narcissist. Also, people who are psychopaths, some of them are like this too. People like this live in the present moment, and it's partially because they have no remorse, they're callous. But basically, what's in the past is in the past, unless you've hurt their ego. If they have a transaction with you and there's no good reason in their mind to honor that transaction, they'll violate it. If they don't have a choice, they'll do it, but that's because they feel they don't have a choice. And that's why they call Trump transactional, because he lives in the moment. He makes his decisions in the moment. And as long as there is a good reason for him to honor that decision, he will. But as soon as that reason is gone, he will go back on it, which is why you see him flip-flopping on things. And also some things he just doesn't care about. So whichever way the wind is blowing, just like most politicians, he's going to say, this is the way it is. This is the way it is. But for other things, it's, do I really need to honor this obligation? Yeah, no, that's how he will talk. And that's why he can be very inconsistent about some things. He doesn't really care about abortion. I don't think he really cares about transgender either, or LGBTQ. I think it's mostly because he has a large base of evangelicals and fundamentalists who follow correctly the Bible, which doesn't have anything to do with transgender, but it is very firmly against at least homosexual males, if not females, because it talks about male on male as being forbidden. It's not explicit about females, but it is explicit about males. And there are several passages in the Bible that reinforce that. But anyways, I've digressed once again. So I hope that this explains, and I'm sorry for taking so long, why he's not malignant, but he is a grandiose narcissist. If you have any questions or concerns, put them down below. But as always, remember, on my channel, I do expect you to be civil. If you're not civil, I'll give you one warning, and then I'll kick you out. So just be an adult, a responsible, mature, conscientious, civil adult. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.
If you would like to help me and get something out of it by helping me on a one-time basis, you can go to my eBay channel, the PC Expert Amateur, where you can purchase the items that I have on sale there. There are lots of keyboards and mouses and some other items as well. I've got cable organizers with power supplies and and a bunch of other stuff, a nice variety of things that I have reviewed in the past, and I no longer need, and I need to make space. Plus, I also need the money. So if you want to do that, the information's on the screen.
I need to ask for your help. Things have been challenging. Well, whose life hasn't been challenging lately? So if you can please help me out by liking, subscribing, sharing, commenting, and turning on notifications, that would be really, really super. Also, if you'd like to help me financially and you can afford to, you can do a super thanks on my Glenn's Fast Reviews channel, or you can become a member there. Or if you prefer, you can go to patreon.com/GLENNMII and become a member there instead. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to Bleeping Computer for their support of my channel. If you need resources for computers, for getting rid of malware and learning about cybersecurity and stuff, Bleeping Computer, BLEEPING computer.com is a great resource. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day.